Jeff's Story, starring Jeff Taylor. Years ago, an accident happened. Of course, it wasn't at that Jewish hospital, but it was a hospital like this one, just like this one. And together, they made it happen. Jeff's Story.
Sunday morning, Mother and I went to church. It was a very special Sunday morning. A lot of Jeff's friends went to church that Sunday. We had already met some of his closest friends at the hospital. That morning at church will always be a special time to recall, because Jeff was still alive, and I believe it was due to the goodness of God and Him answering our prayers regarding Jeff. Some of Jeff's friends we met on Saturday. That day there had been a special blood drive to help defer the cost of all the blood Jeff had to have, and many of his friends and Roy and Jan's friends gave blood. They would come in after donating blood with their band-aids on, and we would talk and get to know them. The boys in the car that were following Jeff the night of the accident came, and we got to hear their part of the story. It seems that they had been following Jeff, and they went down the hill. They could tell by Jeff's lights that he was going faster and faster. Suddenly they couldn't see his lights. Seconds later, they came upon Jeff's bike laying on its side as they couldn't see Jeff. Then they spotted Jeff laying at the bottom of the big light pole. When they got to him, he was moaning, but not responding. When the ambulance got there, the attendants put Jeff in a blow-up body bag so he couldn't move around. When Jeff arrived at the hospital ER, he had no blood pressure and a very weak pulse. They gave him something to paralyze him so he couldn't move or fight them. They knew he was bleeding on the inside. So it could be determined where he was bleeding. When Roy and Jan had arrived at the hospital, they had come in the back way. They came in the back way and had seen Jeff laying on an exam table. He had no visible cuts or wasn't bleeding, so it was hard to believe that the doctors were saying about Jeff is going to die. During the surgery, Jeff's heart stopped 3 times, each time for a longer period of time. A nurse was keeping them informed as she would come out and tell them that his heart had stopped. When the doctors had opened up Jeff, they could see that one of the chambers of his heart had burst on impact with the concert lamp pole. He had also torn his liver and broke some ribs, and I believe ruptured his spleen. They put Jeff on a heart machine and started to repair his heart chamber. It was during this that his heart would stop. The last time his heart stopped, it had not responded to getting it to start beating again, and the doctors were fixing to go out. They were fixing to go out. Anyway, they were fixing to go out and tell Roy and Jan that he was gone, and his heart started beating on its own. They were able to repair the chamber, place his heart back, give him more blood, and do the other needed repairs and sew him up. This whole time, Roy and Jan and Rick and the others that Rick had called continued to pray. I believe those prayers swayed Jeff's future that early Tuesday morning. Sunday we had a spiritually uplifting day. I feel that Jeff's accident changed lives. Some we will not know until glory. The exchanges we were allowed to have with others in that little waiting room will always be a blessing to me. If no one else's life was changed over Jeff's horrible accident, mine was. I have always believed in the power of prayer and positive thinking, but the reality of it was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to me during this whole time period and since. Monday, I was to leave for El Paso. Ronnie and I had gotten the kids over the weekend, and I needed to get home. I was to fly out of Orange County late Monday afternoon. I hated to leave Jeff. He was so stressed out over his loss of sight. However, I missed my flight. I had an upset stomach and was in the bathroom when my flight was called. I know now that I missed that flight for a reason, but at the time I was so angry with myself, so I spent another night at the hospital. I rescheduled my flight for Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday morning, we received the news that Jeff was being moved from the intensive care unit to a private room. This was way ahead of schedule. The doctors had at first thought he would be in intensive care for at least 2 weeks. Around noon, they moved him to a private room on the children's wing. I was going to leave later that afternoon. His room was small, but I tried to stay with him most of the afternoon. Before I left, I was standing to the right of his bed. I was holding his hand, and he was constantly asking what time it was, if it was day or night. How long had he been like this? There was a large round clock, oh God, on his wall in front of his bed. It was placed rather high on the wall and a little to the left. I looked up to see the time, and his head followed mine. Remember, Jeff couldn't see. We'd been told he probably would never see again. I was wearing a red top and white pants. Okay. I asked Jeff if he could see me. He said he could see my body movements, but that he couldn't see my face. But he told me I was wearing a red top. Talk about almost shouting for joy. I was by myself. The others had gone home for a short time. When they came back, I met them in the hall, and they couldn't believe me, and didn't believe me until it was proven to them. Over the next couple of days, Jeff regained his sight. Now, his vision isn't as good as it was before the accident, and he especially has trouble with reading for long periods of time, especially when tired or stressed out. But when compared to total blindness, his sight was restored. Oh my God, I left that afternoon heading for home knowing in my know-her that we had a full-fledged miracle on our hands. On reflecting on that summer, I remember not only the sadness of Jeff's pain and injuries, and the times we would leave his room tired and temporarily defeated from trying to answer his questions and trying to relieve his worries. But I remember we had some very precious moments that drew us closer to God and closer together. I remember some of the people we met, knowing God sent them our way for a purpose. Some to witness to, some to give us relief, even comic relief, like the elderly lady who came to the waiting room to visit her husband. She looked and dressed like a 30s movie star. She had rode the bus from San Diego. I remember the little newborn baby in his family, who renewed our spirits and made it easier to give to Jeff. Meeting Rick, who will always have a special place in my heart. Meeting Jeff's friends. To see two parents rise above the everyday chaos of life and share the faith that at that point in life to pray life changes prayers. These are all stories in the story.
Stop.